we can get started. People are starting to roll, and hello to everyone who joined. It's always so nice to see like familiar names pop up in the background when they're coming up. So hi to everyone. Minnie, thank you for being here and for making the time. I feel like everyone who's doing this work is so slammed and so busy, especially you. It's like such an impossible time to just sit for a second and have a conversation. So I'm really super grateful. Um, for
I mean,
those
listen,
folks,
I'm
yeah.
grateful for you inviting me, and you're totally increasing my credibility with my team, because you've just got a whole building of super fans at Reproductive Freedom for
Oh,
All.
well,
And
that's so nice.
yeah, no, seriously, my activists, our supporters, uh, they come to you. We all come to you for breaking news.
That
You're
means a
doing the
lot.
coverage that we want everyone to do. So thank you. And it's just
Yeah,
fun to catch up with you too.
always fun. We were just talking about perimenopause before you all logged on, which is a whole other that won't be on live. That'll be a separate
Another day.
conversation another day. Um, so I imagine that the nice thing about the viewers here and the readers of the newsletter is that they're pretty in the know. They get it. We can have like more than an intro level conversation. But for the few who may log in who don't know you, aren't familiar with Reproductive Freedom for All's work, can you just talk a little bit about what the organization does, how you came to join it? Just give folks a little bit of the big picture.
Yeah, thanks for letting me do that. So,
Yeah.
Reproductive Freedom for All, I like to call it the artist formerly known as NARAL Pro Choice America. And so we've been around since pre Roe, 55 years. We are a legacy reproductive freedom abortion rights org, originally started as the National Association to Repeal Abortion Laws pre Roe, then the National Abortion Rights Action League post Roe, then NARAL Pro Choice America, and now Reproductive Freedom for All. And, 4 million members now across the United States and all 50 states combined, with chapters in California, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Michigan. And we're working on expanding the map to more battleground states. So it's exciting. I have members all the way from, their 80s to their teens. We
I
recently had
love
an
that.
activist summit and had 100 folks in town, from like a 16-year-old from Texas to a 65-year-old from Michigan. So,
That's so cool.
yeah, we're like old school, boots on the ground, roll up your sleeves, organizing. And that's always been our hallmark from our
Yeah.
founding to now. I'm an organizer by training. I started off with Acorn, if folks remember Acorn,
Yeah.
like back in Texas, working on, fair housing issues, and then working on campaigns across the country, and culminating with my job working for Cecile Richards at Planned Parenthood, and started my career actually in repro with Planned Parenthood in Texas. So this has
Oh, I don't think
been
I
the
knew that. Wow.
culmination of a lifetime of my work, and it's just awesome to be able to do this work right now.
Wow. That's a bit.
Yeah.
How long have you been with the organization now? It's been
It will be
a
4
minute.
years in November because I joined I
4 years.
joined
That's quite a
I know it's been intense. I joined 2 weeks before the oral arguments in Dobbs.
wow.
Yeah, so my whole tenure
Oh my
has been
God.
like are centered around, like, we knew Dobbs was coming, we knew Roe was gonna be overturned despite the believability gap, which,
Yeah.
we'll talk about,
Yeah.
which we still are dealing with, right?
Yeah.
We knew it was happening, and the board was like, "Hey, we really need you here before those oral arguments because that's when the new round of
Yeah.
work is gonna start."
Wow.
Yeah,
What a
I know.
time to come on. That's so
You have
well.
to laugh, it's just been
You
chaotic
do.
ever since.
I mean, it's not. Well, that's actually was going to be the first question that I asked you because it is so chaotic. It is so overwhelming. We're all so overwhelmed. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest things about doing this work, right? Is that it's changing so quickly. There's a new story every day. There's a new like nightmare 4 times a day. And just thinking about like the last few days of news coverage that we've been tracking is nuts. There was the New York Times article about the infertility training centers, the woman in Tennessee who was refused prenatal care because she was unwed, right? Like there's always something. And so I'm wondering what is occupying your brain right now? Like what are you thinking about this week? Well, everyone else is talking about the Epstein files. What's in your head? Though maybe it's the Epstein files. But what's in your head?
Well, I'll just start by addressing the Epstein files. I think it's been really important to talk about
Yeah.
the fact that it's not just a sideshow, it's not just a titillating
Mhm.
story, but it's so like endemic and emblematic of this
Mm,
administration. Right? We have a sexual abuser as president. He's responsible for overturning Roe and denying 50% plus of the population their fundamental freedoms. Of course, he's a serial predator. Of course, he's in the Epstein files. Of course, this is like the dark underbelly of who these people are. And I just think it's up to us to keep connecting the dots.
yeah.
You can talk about it being like, oh, buddy horror show, buddy comedy gone wrong, and like all these Democrats laughing at the Republicans, which I think, to be petty, it is
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah.
entertaining. But we're not centering the victims in this. And that's the same thing with repro, right? With abortion rights, we don't center the victims enough. I won't survivors, the folks who are the
Yeah,
fighters. What about
yeah,
all these women what about all these women whose lives were ruined by Jeffrey Epstein and by Donald Trump?
yeah.
And why didn't we believe all the women who came out in
Mhm.
the first place against Donald Trump? And why is it this thing that's taking them down? And this thing, and I think there's a lesson here. I'm still digging into
Mm,
it about how
yeah.
we take down antis and Republicans vis-a-vis
Mm,
this story. What was the thing that
that's interesting.
cracked, right?
Right.
Why is it this thing that's cracking the MAGA
That's
alliance?
what I don't understand. I don't understand it. I'm like, I don't understand how anyone's surprised. We know he's a predator. We like you said, of course he's in the Epstein files. Of course. So like what is it about this thing is that they embedded it into the conservative consciousness too much, right? Like and it became this thing that was bigger than Trump. I don't know. I don't get it, but I think that that's a great question, right? Like how do you replicate that
Yeah,
to
for
direct
good.
it, yeah, for good, like
Good.
to direct it towards all of the antis. I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something to it because what's on my mind, just to kind of thread back to
Yeah.
that other question. I just actually came out of a bunch of briefings for some new research we're going to release shortly.
Mm,
And some of the through lines, again, it's the believability, right? So we have a
yeah.
lot of Trump supporters who, when you survey them, say, I actually do support a legal right to abortion. But they don't believe, or they didn't believe, that Donald Trump was going to do anything about it or that he was going to cause
Hmm.
additional harm. So we now have to go back to them and say, let us show you all the crazy stuff his admin is doing.
Yeah.
When we show that information to Trump supporters and focus groups, they don't like it. They feel lied to. They're pissed off. So that tells you a couple, threading the Epstein stuff to
Yeah.
this, it shows they don't like being lied to.
Yeah.
That's like a fundamental human thing
Yeah.
across, politics. Don't lie to me. And Republican voters said pretty clearly banning abortion was not what they wanted to see. This was over. They didn't want to hear about it. This wasn't a priority. It's why Trump so many times on the trail said, leave it to the states. I'm not banning abortion. They know it's a loser for them. So we have to just keep breaking through to explain it. And they're smart about making sure it's so convoluted that it's not a national abortion ban. And as you've talked about so much, it's a backdoor abortion ban. But what we mean by that is they're banning abortion in the death by a thousand cuts, right? Not a flat out legislative
Right.
effort. So this is all by design, but we know if we invest in
Mm,
communicating with those independent swing voters who may have held their nose and voted on Trump on other issues, if we can
mm,
convince them and explain to them that he's been lying to them, it really resonates and it makes them angry.
right.
And there's something we can do to weaponize that.
Right. How do we get it in front of them though, right? Like you're doing a poll and you get to show people, right? Like you have a captive audience and
Yeah,
you can show them like,
exactly.
okay, this is what they're doing. Obviously there's so much noise, there's so much overwhelm, there's so much
Yeah.
news and information, right? Like how do we make it break through? And something you and I have talked about before is some people just don't believe it, right? Like they don't believe it. You'll put out a story, and especially because so many of these stories are so crazy and are so wild. When you start talking about infertility centers or they're burning $10 million of birth control, that sounds that's like a whole other fucking conversation. But like it sounds so crazy.
Crazy. It sounds
And
unbelievable.
right. So how
Yeah.
do you make people, outside of I don't even know. How do you make people believe it? Is there anything that you guys have found that really helps those stories to break through?
A couple of things we've learned. You kind of have to connect the dots for them with what is breaking through. And right now,
Mm,
what's breaking through is Medicaid. Um,
mm,
Folks are they're hearing a lot of stories about it. They're seeing direct impact in their communities. Clinics are shutting down. Hospitals are denying care. There are entire, OBGYN deserts in key states.
yeah,
So they're seeing the real time effects of the big bullshit bill, as
right.
you and I both called it.
Yep.
Um, so we have to connect repro to that. If
Mm,
repro's not cutting, if the abortion ban tactics aren't cutting through, we need to make sure folks understand the connection.
mm,
Medicaid is, the primary, like 40% of all births in the United States are funded by Medicaid, prenatal care, postpartum care, access to contraception, your local Planned Parenthood clinic, the whole set of services that we rely on for a majority of Americans who are in marginalized communities, but also in rural communities. Folks, you may not even realize you're on the Medicaid, but you are rely on Medicaid. So we've been doing a lot of campaign work, organizing digital ads, billboards,
mm,
connecting the dots for voters about Medicaid cuts and reproductive health care. And that's going
mm,
to be, I think, a big part of our strategy based on this research we're seeing. We also need to keep talking about it in a way that they understand. And it's not
right.
always going to be language that we as movement leaders love, but it's going to be stuff that resonates with those swing voters because our base is with us on this. But we
Mm.
lost a lot of folks in the middle.
So can you
We
give an
lost a lot of
example of
white.
what you mean with the language?
Yeah,
You know?
here's what I'll say. So, like, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. In Arizona,
Yeah.
where we have a huge chapter and we spent millions of dollars, we had folks who turned out for the ballot measure who
Hmm.
then ticket split. They voted for Ruben
Yes.
Gallego and then they voted for Donald Trump. And we know, even without a poll, that they're pro reproductive freedom because they voted for the ballot measure to
Hmm.
codify the right to abortion in the state constitution. So
Right.
we specifically went back to those communities and asked the question, why? And the answers we got were things like, I didn't believe Trump would do anything else. He doesn't seem to really care about abortion. So why
Mm,
would he? He said he was leaving it to the states and I'm in the state and I just protected my right.
mm,
But that population, that's what I mean when I'm talking about the swing folks. And they
hmm.
weren't enough to lose the state for Kamala Harris. So when I'm
Right.
talking to those voters, I want to connect the dots to what's happening right now. They're feeling it in their pocketbooks, closures of healthcare centers in their community. And I don't want to shame and blame them.
Mm,
This is important for our
yeah.
base because we get really pissed off. I don't even want to talk to these family members of mine who are Trump supporters. They're voting against my humanity. And that's true in many ways. But many of them didn't think they were doing that. These aren't the
Mm,
hardcore MAGA supporters. These
right.
are just regular folks who vote every 4 years, don't pay attention to all of the nuances in the election. But the other piece of the messaging is they are more compelled when they hear things about emergency abortion care.
Mm,
They need to understand how it could affect them. They are less persuaded by the other arguments we might make as a movement about, the value of having access no matter what. Right? No,
hmm.
but they are compelled when they hear stories like Amanda Zarowski,
Right.
right? Because but for anyone who's not following it, but I'm sure your audience is, it's all these stories that came out post jobs about women who needed emergency abortion care. The cases that came out around the EMTALA fight, right?
Hmm.
Women who were bleeding out in parking lots, women who were being denied care up to the last minute, even the Adriana Smith case. These extreme examples, which are not the norm, but the extreme exceptions, these are the things that make people really angry and
Right.
really freak them out. So we have to capitalize on them.
Yeah. Do you think that Republicans have been doing a good job, though, it's like distancing themselves, right? Like one of the things we saw with Adriana Smith was immediately, I mean, either the big anti-abortion groups didn't say anything, or they said, "Oh, the ban doesn't require that. The hospital made a mistake," right? Like they immediately sort of distance themselves. And then with the emergency abortion stuff, what we're seeing are all of these, bullshit nonsense laws that they're passing, like med ed laws and laws saying we're clarifying the ban. It's better. Right. And Republicans feel like they're getting these sort of fake wins with legislation that they claim is going to, make sure that women aren't bleeding out in parking lots. We know that that's not true. Do you think that those efforts are sort of successful on the state level, or do we need to wait and see? I mean, this is something they're clearly thinking about.
Yeah, Texas and Georgia.
Yeah.
some of the worst bans, there are now like, there's new legislation to clarify.
Exactly.
Um, I here's what I'll say. I think in those states we're already in an uphill battle because of the supermajority of extremists, so it's hard to say.
Sure.
Like does there
Yeah.
the way that they've, suppressed the vote in those states and the way that they've extremely gerrymandered their state legislature and what they're going to try to now do with their congressional seats makes it really hard to measure how successful these
Mm,
things are. But I think it's a measure of our success that they feel like they have to do that shit.
right.
I mean, I think that, they are running scared.
Yeah.
Right? They're not standing up for what they did. They know how deeply
Mhm.
unpopular it is. So I think we have to when you smell that kind of blood in the water, I'm mixing
Yeah.
metaphors, but when you smell that fear, we gotta go for the jugular. They are
Yeah.
unpopular. The average American voter does not like this. So I think we have to think more, and we're spending some time thinking more about how do we go much more on the offense against the antis, because what they stand for is so deeply unpopular and we have to make them politically disqualifying.
Right. Exactly. It's been really interesting to me to watch. I don't know if you saw this, the New Jersey politician who was not able to get care for her ectopic pregnancy or Muller pregnancy, and then went on to blame pro-choicers, right? Like that's their
Yeah,
new national message. Their new
yeah.
national message is the law is fine, or we're clarifying the law. It's pro-choicers, it's abortion rights organizations that are fear mongering. They're making doctors too afraid to provide care. I'm biased, but to me, that message seems so weak.
Yeah,
It seems
yeah.
so absurd, right? Like, I just can't imagine that anyone is buying it, but how are you all thinking about that?
I mean, it's smart in that it taps into the believability challenge we already have, right? And they
Right,
have the same research and data that we do. They know that people don't want to believe that there's an entire political party and movement designed
right,
to trap and lie women into life and death situations and essentially murder us, right?
right.
They don't want to believe that. That's hard to believe. But I think that the arguments that it's not what the Republicans are doing wrong is they're blaming the providers, and
Right,
people trust their provider more than they trust politicians.
right,
So that's the critical there's really not a lot of ways to wiggle out of this except to blame the providers, and when they blame the providers, it backfires and it loses its believability from their side. So, but
right.
again, it all has to break through. The other thing is I don't think what they're doing is really breaking through to enough voters that it matters, but it is giving
Mm,
them cover in their little world of donors
right,
and supporters.
right. The places I worry about their sort of like really nonsense messages breaking through are some of the fake science, right? Like I don't know if you saw this story today. The Missouri AG is suing Planned
Yes.
Parenthood, claiming that they lied about mifepristone safety, and he is using, the nonsense, like fake, the fake bullshit Charlotte Lozier studies that say abortion medication is not safe. And now I haven't read through all the articles, but like I'm looking, and you're seeing that claim repeated, right, in
Yeah,
in
yeah.
media with like not a tremendous amount of pushback.
Fact checking.
And we've seen that bad science make it all the way up to, some pretty high to the Supreme Court. So what do you think that we can do about those messages, right? Like the fake science, the stuff that we know is absolute bunk and nonsense. But as soon as, maybe the average voter or the average reader sees something that's like, the such and such policy institute, it gives credibility in their mind.
I don't know that the average, like, American well, first of all, unfortunately, due to the lack of the decline of the American media, I don't know how much
Yeah.
of this information is reaching anybody. I
Yeah.
depressingly, right? Like, you and your work on TikTok is reaching more Americans than,
Right.
an AP story on, that mentions as a footnote the Charlotte Lozier Institute. That
Yeah.
being said, I'm not trying to minimize the impact of
Of
fake
course.
science because, of course, that's what, the FDA right now, FDA Commissioner Martin McCary is using to justify a potential review of mifepristone again, despite that all that junk science got that case all the way to the Supreme Court last year. So we can't dismiss it. I don't know that it shapes public opinion, however. This is an important
Right.
thing. Our movement has spent so much, in my org too, so many resources on shifting the public narrative. What's interesting is post Dobbs, the public's with us, but these extremists still have a capture of the Republican right. This is what I'm sort of trying to dissect. Like, the
Mm,
American people are with us, and yet they're still voting for some of these lunatics who have been captured by these extremists
mm,
who do not represent the bulk of their voters.
yeah.
And it's because of a lot of things, right? It's because of the erosion of our democracy. It's because of the electoral college. It's because of, the lack of proportional representation in Congress. Like, there's so many, right? The filibuster. There's so many reasons why majority opinions on things like abortion are not reflected in legislative efforts. So I just think it's important for us to keep reminding ourselves the majority is with us. It's about how we get things done and how we win
Mm,
fights, as
mhm,
opposed to going after windmills here, right? And now that doesn't mean we shouldn't be constantly combating misinformation on social media that's targeted to consumers. And you've spent a lot of time talking about like the Peter Thiel like funded anti-birth control, trad wife bullshit, don't take hormonal birth control for it's bad because it's bad for you.
mhm,
That's got a lot more traction right now and is a lot more nefarious to me.
mm,
I think we've done a good job of making sure Democratic, policymakers in the Senate and the House know that these groups are bullshit and fight back, and are going to court. But we don't control the courts, and we don't
right,
control the Senate, right?
right,
So we have to keep eroding their legitimacy, and I think that's important. And I think we have to shut them down the way there was an effort to shut down the NRA. I think we have to go after them and shut
yeah,
them down, and that has to be a project. But we also can't miss that there's this other more nefarious disinfo going straight for the consumer in the medium that they actually watch, which is not Senate hearings and not Supreme
yeah,
Court hearings, oral arguments. It's TikTok.
yeah. That's what
So
I worry
that's
about the most. I mean, I really worry that they are 20 years ahead in that way with shaping sort of the online conversations and making it seem as if, like, yes, we have public opinion, we have Americans with us online. That's not what it seems like, right? Like the algorithm, these Jubilee debates, like all of these sorts
oh
of
my
things that
God.
they are pushing, which are, I mean, it's such a nightmare. They make it seem as if this is an issue that people are evenly split on, that this is an issue that's controversial. It makes people feel like, well, maybe it's not that popular. Maybe I do need to. And I think that you're right. It's like we're spending so much time trying to shift public opinion when it's with us. Um, it's a distraction in one way, right? So people are spending all of their time on that rather than changing the systems or changing
We have to do all
gerrymandering.
of it,
We have to do
unfortunately.
all of it.
And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about our movement, the reproductive rights, health, and justice movement, is we're all doing pieces of the work. We're talking to each other. We're in coalition. We've never been in better coordination than before. Nothing like a crisis to bring everybody together. But I do feel like dividing and conquering these buckets of
Mm,
work. So we have to be doing the online disinfo, pushback, and the research. We've got smart partners who are doing those things, folks like Ultraviolet, Guttmacher Institute, et cetera. But then we also have to be engaging and educating policymakers. So many of our groups are doing that. Litigation, great partners like CRR doing that. Providers doing both, like Planned Parenthood, the independent clinics. So where I'm focused is what's the and where I see NARAL and reproductive freedom for all our space is the political, electoral,
mm,
and organizing piece of this. So how are we using grassroots to take down the antis and delegitimize them? How are we then turning those folks around to be activists and getting folks elected and then holding those elected officials accountable? Like, we elected you, now we expect you to do something, and here's what we expect you
mm,
to do. So creating that 365 culture of activism, but really micro targeting, policymakers and going on the offense against bad actors who are influencing policymakers is our
right.
sweet spot.
Can you talk more about that? About what that looks like to delegitimize some of these folks, right? Like on a tangible level in the states, on a national messaging. Like how are you all thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work that we've done historically has been around research on the antis. I think we're reevaluating a lot of that. We took a kind of a break because of all the crisis. But we're
Understandable.
looking at it again, Jessica, because we have to. we have to be able to show the receipts of how full of crap they were, and I think what we learned through the mifepristone litigation with the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, we were spending a lot of time educating policymakers and the press about the fake science, right? And
Right.
and we were able to discredit them enough that the case basically got kicked down because they weren't legitimate. The court wasn't going
Mm,
to say you're a fake science, but they did come down and say you don't have standing. And they didn't have standing because they were a fake science bullshit organization, right? So we
right.
essentially, as a coalition, there were many of our orgs, us, ACLU, several Planned Parenthood, many other groups that came together and ran like a multi-month campaign organizing our grassroots around what AHM was, how important Miffy is, that
Mm,
mifepristone is popular, that mifepristone is safer than Tylenol. And we had to just be round the clock organizing. But what that meant was, going back into states, doing petition drives, educating voters, talking to our members, putting out op eds, buying digital ads, doing social content. It was every tactic you can think of. And then bringing everyone back together, delivering petitions to the court and doing a ton of press around
mhm,
that. We had to do all those things for almost 6 months to break through at all in that news cycle.
right.
So to me, that was a big lesson learned. Like, we can't go into the next cycle ignoring these folks. They are very dangerous. I just don't want the argument to be they represent the majority. The argument has to keep being
Mm,
that they are fake, it's junk science. They represent an extremely fringe minority, and they're trying to take away something really important and popular to you, American voter, you, repro activist. That is the kind of energy and engagement that we need from the grassroots. And by that, I mean, folks on this call are some of those same folks, right? You are educated, you're paying attention to repro, you care about it. And if I ask you to take an action, you probably will because you're one of those highly
mhm,
informed folks.
right. Right. Ugh, you know what
It's a lot.
the it's a lot. No, this is great, and I'm so grateful for you talking about it at this level. The
Oh, and then I
thing
should add, just because this is the new frontier,
yeah.
that people aren't answering the phones anymore. People are
Mm,
getting sick of being spammed by phone calls. So, where
y
we've had to really invest and grow is digital
mm,
organizing, relational online organizing. What do I mean by that? I mean, I have a smart team of mostly young women who are creating tools for folks to share information with friends and family over text, over socials,
mhm,
sharing, fact checking information, sending information last year about AHM and about Miffy, and organizing in their communities online. So that's why we've ramped up all of our presence on social and we're connecting it to the organizing because many people, especially younger folks, aren't going to house parties, don't
sure,
necessarily want to go to a rally, but they will take an action from home and they will
sure,
and they're digital natives and they want their organizing to be digital.
right. And there's also just this huge opportunity, and this is why I'm glad that you all are focusing on antis and thinking about like that oppo research. I think that this is something that you and I have talked about before, where we know, right? We know anti-abortion groups are incredibly unpopular, even among anti-abortion voters. They actually don't like the organizations, right? Like they're a bunch of creeps, and they know it. But what's also interesting is that there's this narrative gap that like people don't know who the anti-abortion leaders are, right? Like there's not a Cecile Richards, there's not who is that for the
Yeah.
anti-abortion movement? Like people don't know, and so there's this opportunity to paint a picture for them. And one of the things I think about all the time that I wish that people would talk about more, you've talked about how extreme they are, is the fact that they don't believe in exceptions for people's lives, right? Like they actually don't. And we don't talk about that nearly enough. One of the things that makes me so nuts is whenever, some terrible story comes out about someone dying, you'll see Susan B. Anthony Pro Life America, you'll see like, Charlotte Lozier, one of these groups come out and say, doctors are allowed to provide care, life-saving care. Doctors are allowed to intervene. They'll never say abortion. They'll never say that abortion is legal, life-saving abortion. Just like, why aren't we talking about this all the time? Like, why aren't we asking them straight out, do you believe in life-saving abortion? Not interventions, not care, right? But life-saving abortions. Do you believe in it? They won't say it. They just
Yeah, they
won't.
won't. And they won't show up in public. Although I gotta tell you, this made me insane. After the defund provision went through in the big bullshit bill against Planned Parenthood, SBA list, Susan B. Anthony list, Marjorie Dansfeller had an
Mhm.
event in DC and they put it online where they had all these right wing lunatics showing up to celebrate the end of Planned Parenthood. And they're all like, thumbs up. Embarrassingly, my team just said, like, so cringe, embarrassing. And
Yeah.
I was like, why do they feel so comfortable doing that?
Yeah.
That should be like
Yeah.
death sentence for them,
Disqualifying. Yeah. It's true.
disqualifying. It should be because it's so out of the norm. Planned Parenthood is so popular as a brand. So many Americans have had their healthcare at a Planned Parenthood that it's ghoulish.
Mm,
It's bullying, nasty behavior.
mm,
It's not the kind of
yeah.
win that they think it is.
Right.
And so, yeah, that probably did start my brain, Jessica, going, well, yeah, why aren't we going after them harder? We got to really put them out of their
Yeah.
misery.
Well, even just knowing that there's like that they did that live and there's a video out there, like, God, what a treasure trove of clips for
I
us.
know. I told my team we need to clip every person, every elected official who showed up, screenshot that, and that's an ad.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I know you said you have some research that's coming out soon. Is there anything else that you can tell us about the research or anything that was surprising to you all as you were talking to voters?
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of surprising. I mean, it confirmed a lot of the things we already knew that we weren't breaking through, right? Like
Mhm.
that people just did not believe it. It was very clarifying to understand that despite how we may feel about Trump, people really
Yeah.
did believe him.
Yes.
Again, I mean, I don't know that I was totally surprised we saw the outcome, but I think on some gut level, I was like, how on earth could anyone believe him? Right. And it's going to be really important for us who are organizing in this next election. And that election is this fall. It's not next year. We've got Virginia, we've got New Jersey, we've got a
Mm.
Supreme Court race, we've got governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey. We got a Supreme Court race in Pennsylvania. We're already building towards. Those are really critical for reproductive freedom, particularly Virginia. Um, Understanding that Trump supporters feel just as betrayed and angry as the rest of us, and that we cannot condescend to them.
Right.
We have to take a minute and say, yeah, you know what? We're validating your feelings. That's going to be hard for a lot of us, but we have to have the discipline to
I'm
do it.
glad that's your job and not my job because it couldn't be me.
I'm not asking
I
you to go have dinner with them. I'm
Oh,
not asking you to be friends with them, but when we're talking to them, and
of course.
this goes to the Epstein stuff.
Mm,
Not to be a broken record, but I've been thinking
no,
about
yeah.
it a lot. I've been sort of obsessed with it. Like,
I love it.
what is it? Again, it comes back to they don't like being lied to. And the one thing Trump had going for him was, I'm not a liar. I tell you what, I tell it like it is. I'm an honest broker. I don't really give a shit about abortion. That's not my top priority, which is what his
Mhm.
voters wanted to hear. He's
Right.
not going to screw around with it. But one other thing that came up in the polling that I think is really useful, and again, I wouldn't say it's surprising, but clarifying.
Mhm.
The Trump, the the grace that they give Trump,
Mm.
I mean, they're angry at him now, but the grace that they were giving him does not extend to congressional Republicans. They totally believe congressional Republicans are in bed with these lunatics. They
Right.
totally believe that they will screw them. They don't trust Democrats that much more. But on abortion, there's a clear Democrats won't do that. Republicans
Right.
will. So as we go into 2026 and key races in the Senate, fingers crossed, Roy Cooper jumps in any minute in North Carolina. Roy Cooper is a true reproductive freedom champion. He was attorney general. He was governor.
Mm.
He has been with us. He gets these issues. He's fearless. I'm excited. John Ossoff, we got to reelect him in Georgia. He's been doing tons of, fighting back in Georgia about, sharing info on maternal health
The maternal mortality
and
reports
maternal
that his office put
mortality.
out, yeah.
He's been a great advocate for so many of the families in the state who've lost family members. And I think you're going to see, and his wife is a OBGYN. He
Mm.
gets this
I
issue
didn't
in
know
his
that, yeah.
core. He's a new dad. He's had his second baby. I think he just came back from parental leave. So he and Ruben Gallego are part of the New Dads Caucus in the Senate,
Cute.
and it's important, right? Like, they're younger, they get it at a visceral level. So as we go into 2026, the Republican Party as a whole and Republican office holders who are not Donald J. Trump do not enjoy the same
Mm,
benefit of the doubt with voters. So when we get really angry, though, it's like how we talk about Trump. We got to empathize and then share the info, the truth, and kind of capitalize on their anger and their
right,
betrayal to move
right,
them to our side. And Democrats just have to be louder and bolder on this issue.
right. What role do you think that mainstream outlets are playing here? Because obviously, when Trump is saying, I don't give a shit about abortion, I would veto a national ban, I'm not interested in a national ban, we knew that was bullshit. We knew that the language that they were using around like minimum national standards or whatever was all a front. But one of the things that frustrated me most was, continually seeing these headlines that said Trump promises to veto national ban. And that gives a tremendous amount of legitimacy to these claims. That makes it more believable for folks. But how many people are how big of a role do you think that plays? Like, how much influence do you think that headlines like that have, and how much energy do you think that we should be spending either on a national level or a state and local level, sort of educating newsrooms, educating reporters, calling out terrible headlines and coverage?
I think it's an ongoing challenge. I mean, the question of how much energy, I guess I always think about it in terms of percentage of time, proportion of
Sure.
resources. Again, it goes back to how effective is the mainstream press these days.
Right.
I mean, I would not say we should stop educating the
Sure.
press. We have to keep putting pressure on the press. I mean, I think the folks at the 19th, like some of the specialty press, are doing
Yep.
an incredible job, but that's not enough. So my comms team spends an exceptional amount of time, like basically meeting with reporters, doing coffees, doing lunches, socializing with the
Yeah.
Capitol press corps to make sure that they know what the hell they're talking about. I
Mm.
won't name names, but I am a source for a lot of folks, in the major publications and on TV, who I can speak to on background and say, hey, this is what
Yeah.
you should ask when you have this guest on. And I think that is a part of our work, is to
Mm.
spend that time cultivating press as trusted, messengers,
Hmm.
so that we're able to give them the real information. And there's a whole system for that,
Right.
that's beyond like sending out press releases and doing cable shows. Which we also do quite a lot, because you still have to. Um, but I think that there's a lot of smart young Capitol Press Corps
Mm.
talent in this town, and in state capitals across the country, who my
Yeah.
state directors spend a lot of time with. And we can shape them, and they're young people themselves, and they are pissed. Again, I
Right.
won't name the personalities, but there's so many
Sure.
reporters who I know who are personally scared about
Right.
Dawes. They
Right.
relate to these bans. They're like, if I'm traveling and I'm pregnant and I have to go to a state to
Mm.
cover a candidate, am I going to be able to be safe?
Yeah.
Same thing goes with, some of the trans folks we know in the industry, right? In the media industry. So we've got to capital again, we're the majority and we're
Mm.
everywhere. So we
Mm.
have to tap into that, and we have to keep providing them facts.
Right. Well, and I also worry about overwhelm, right? Because what we're seeing is that there's not a tremendous amount of repro rights reporters at these big publications. We're talking about political generalist reporters, education reporters, health reporters. Everyone's sort of covering this issue. And they
And
don't,
some of
and
them
it's
just do
not,
not have the knowledge.
and they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the context, they don't have the background. It's not like they're doing it deliberately, right? It's not like they're repeating something that we know is false deliberately. Or not asking the right questions, which is why I'm grateful that you and other people are constantly trying to educate. But I also wonder sometimes if it's an issue of, we need more abortion reporters, we need more reporters who have that information, who have that context and have that knowledge.
I would love that. I think the challenge is we need more reporters,
Yeah.
and we need more funding and support for mainstream press.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, like, everything from your local paper to your
Local
national paper
press.
to the New York. I
Yeah.
mean, we're seeing more and more layoffs in the mainstream press. We're seeing more media consolidation. So this
Yep.
is why we're not seeing dedicated beat reporters on a lot of topics.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, and I wanna deal with
Yeah.
the reality, which is
Mhm.
those folks are likely not gonna come back. Even some of the superstars who, like, did some of the best abortion coverage the last 2
No.
years are now on different beats because,
Yep.
it's not the issue du jour anymore, they think.
Right. Right.
Um,
And it's also just a brutal beat. It's
it's
a
a
right,
brutal
like,
beat, it's depressing.
it's depressing, it's a
No,
brutal beat, it's a
I saw
fight.
your post this morning, where you were like, "Look, I'm a little down," right? And you and I've talked about this. I mean, I've had
Yeah.
days where I'm like, "Ugh, I need a break," right? And that's when it's
Yeah.
fun for me to think about the democracy work and the courts work,
Mm.
and I'm like, "Okay, I can" or punch a Nazi today metaphorically, like
Amazing. Or in real life or tangibly.
or yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
could
I don't wanna get into punching them in real life because
you can't do
I'm
that, but maybe I
yeah,
can.
I'm also like, yeah, I'm, like, always acutely aware that I'm an immigrant woman, so I'm like, wasn't
Let
born
me
in this
do that.
country, so I'm being really careful.
Let me do that. We're starting to get questions in, and if
Yeah,
folks have
let's do
questions,
it.
please ask some. John says it's more difficult to get repro op-eds published as well. That's very true. It is
100%.
it's really difficult. I think even for people like you, even for leaders of the movement, I think it can be really challenging
Oh
to
my
get
gosh.
those
I
column
won't name the
inches.
name, but we had, a survivor, we
Mm,
were supporting on an op-ed, and I think we're still having challenges placing it in a mainstream national publication because of the question about relevance. They're like, "Well, is this still salient? Is this still an issue?" And I'm like, "This is somebody who literally has who has told a big national story and wants to talk about what's happening right now with the big bullshit bill, and why is it not salient or relevant to you?" It's been hard.
that's really, I mean, but that goes to your point that like so many people are getting their information from social media, from TikTok, from Instagram Reels, and that's our opportunity, right? Like, yeah, maybe you can't get that piece in the Times, maybe you can't, get the Washington Post to cover a storyteller. Um, but if you spend enough time on TikTok, you can get something to go. I mean, it has been amazing to me to see the way, like you all do MSNBC hits, all do media hits. It is fascinating to see the difference in reaction to going even on a primetime MSNBC show to having a viral TikTok
Video.
video. And not even viral, right? Like 50,000, 100,000 views. The turnover to subscribers, the people who take out, like, it is real. There
And
is a real
that's the
action there.
future. I mean, that's the future, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, Substack, all the different YouTube. YouTube is more important now.
Yeah.
Like, we are building our YouTube strategy, and we'll have more to say about that soon. But like
Ugh.
any progressive entity, whether it's Repro or not, that wants to talk to voters in 2025 and 26 has to have a YouTube strategy. Like,
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to shift as much as you have to still try on cable news because there's a whole demographic that only watches cable
Of
news, and
course.
they're an important demographic. But the future is not cable news.
Yeah, you're gonna have to tell me about YouTube because one of the challenges we've had, is the audience is overwhelmingly male. It's an overwhelmingly male audience when you're talking about political videos, and it's just been really interesting to see sort of the difference for us in places like Instagram or TikTok versus YouTube, where it's so much harder for this particular issue to break through. So I'm going to be bothering the hell out of you to find
I
out
will be
what.
asking my team to figure that out too. And I think part of the strategy is going to have to be how do you cross promote and work with male personalities and influencers
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
Anna wants to know if you can provide tips for talking to antis. They say it's hard to discuss the Epstein betrayal when nothing else Trump has done has affected them, and this is what did it. How do we validate their experience without validating the horrible things Trump has done that they were okay with?
So I just want to distinguish between antis and swing voters or,
Mm,
you know, I don't recommend spending a lot of time talking to antis. If someone is an anti-abortion, but maybe with us on other issues, I mean, anti-abortion folks are a tiny sliver of the population. So if
yeah,
they're really, truly an anti, they're not really movable. That's been our
Right.
experience. If they are a voter who's actually mixed, like I don't personally like abortion, but I don't want my daughter to bleed out in a
Mhm.
parking lot,
Yeah.
talk to them. That is exactly who you should be talking to because there's a lot of those folks who will cross over and vote with us on ballot measures, on the down ballot. Those are the types of folks who voted for Ruben Gallego, right? Those are the types of folks who voted
Mhm.
for Melissa Slotkin when they may not have voted for another Democrat statewide. Um, I hear you on not validating all the other bad things. Like maybe they're with us on abortion, but they're horribly anti immigrant. How do you, maybe they are finally seeing the light about Epstein, but they're still like generally supportive of a party that's like a cult and hates most of us. Um, I think the important part is to focus on the validation of you've been lied to and you were sold something that was bullshit. We don't have to agree on everything, but I can see in you, we can connect on the fact that it's a betrayal.
Mm.
And it never feels good to be betrayed. So now that you understand you've been betrayed about Jeffrey Epstein, maybe you can understand and start to see that you've been betrayed on a lot of things like abortion access, support for reproductive freedom, et
Yeah.
cetera, right? Funding
Yeah.
for cancer research and menopause research, funding for prenatal and postpartum care. So I think you take that opening, but you start by validating it really sucks to be lied to and it's enraging, right? I mean,
Mm.
we don't have to agree on everything, but then let's talk about the thing we might come to an agreement on.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. While you're giving advice, I know the thing I hear from a lot of readers, a lot of and like you said, I am feeling it myself. Um, what do you say to people who are feeling overwhelmed, despairing, who know that we're in the majority, right? But who they're not
Oh,
seeing that majority belief reflected in their everyday lives, in what the law looks like, and what the press coverage looks like, right? How do you sort of energize people around this issue, and what personal advice would you give to them to sort of stay energized even when things are so difficult?
yeah, it's hard. I mean, at first, I want to validate that it sucks. And I want to validate that there are days where it's hard to get out of bed. It's hard to do this work. You're reading all the bad news and you're like, God damn, like, I don't want to, I've got a limit for this. That's probably when I start scrolling, menopause TikTok. Take a break, find the other thing that gives you some sense of community. But I joke, but
Yeah.
for me, menopause TikTok is community, right? Because I
Yeah.
was just sharing with you before we went live that I am officially postmenopausal. So
Right there with you.
as of May 5th, I am postmenopausal and I'm loving life.
Oh,
So, all things hormone replacement therapy, it's a godsend. If you aren't on it, consider it. If you were premenopausal, perimenopausal, etc.
yeah.
We're going to talk about that again offline. But I think the core thing is finding community. So
Mm.
one of the things that I love about our org, not to selfishly plug, is
That's what you're here for.
we create community, right? Like we just brought 100 activists together, in Washington, D.C. They had trainings, they were on the Hill, they were meeting with some of the abortion storytellers who were also here, but they were creating community and they have action councils in their home states that go home. They're given tools to organize and connect with each other, whether it's online or whether it's in person. And like my Arizona folks are, they're solely focused on trolling Congressman David Schweikert, who famously said he was conflicted on the Medicaid stuff, but then he voted for it, but slept through some of the votes. So they've been calling him Sleepy Schweikert. They dropped off a gift basket to his office with 5-hour energy drinks and
Amazing.
like sleep masks that said sleepy, only wake me to gut, Medicaid. I mean, like all kinds of, they're just having fun.
Love it.
They're having fun and they're doing it in community, but they're
Mm.
also dead serious about getting rid of this bozo. So it's like
Right.
all the things, right? It's the community, it's the fun, it's the humor, but it's also a sense of purpose. So
Mm.
for me, all those things matter. You got to feed your soul a little bit, but you also have to have some wins. So that's the other thing. We got to celebrate the wins when we have them.
Mm.
So we have to be thinking about all the different ways we're shifting policy. So the other thing, that we're thinking about is how do we push for better, more expansive solutions in states where we have reproductive freedom majorities.
Right.
And when we do that, how do we celebrate those wins? So we have we have activists in blue states who are working on, grassroots mobilization around shield laws. They're supporting abortion funds. They're supporting their indie providers. So also find some things that you can do that are short-term solutions as well, and not just
Mm.
think about next election cycle, because that feels far away, and sometimes it feels hopeless.
Yeah, no, I think that that's such a good point. Those wins, we do need to celebrate them because some of that stuff is legitimately incredible. Like shield laws right now,
Huge,
it's tremendous. The work
incredible.
that they're doing protecting providers is amazing. And when you see how hard Republicans in these banned states are coming after providers, how desperately they want to punish them, extradite them, put them in jail, and the shield laws are just not letting it happen. I think that it's just huge.
And I saw this interview, I think the week of Dobbs. I'm pretty sure you covered this. I'm
Mhm.
forgetting the org, and this is bad, and it'll haunt me, that put out a report about abortion rates numbers going up
Yeah,
despite
yeah,
despite the bans in 21 states, right?
yeah.
Um, and that's because of telehealth and shield laws and mifepristone. And
Mhm.
so Fox News interviewed my fave, Marjorie Dansfeller, and said, "How do you feel about this? You did this big thing and you banned abortion, but abortion rates are still going
It's
up."
not
And she was like,
working.
"That's why we're going to have to crack down on those shield laws and mifepristone." And I was like, this is the playbook. This
Yeah,
is the playbook. We're winning anyway. We're beating them
right,
anyway because you can't stop abortion because people
right.
need it and they will do anything they can to get it. And so she's still Kaiser Family Foundation. Thank you, Anna, slipping me a note. Appreciate that. Um, so they're going to go after it, like because
Mhm.
they can't win because they can't win fair and square. They have to
Yeah.
try to keep changing the game.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really unbelievable thing when you think about the fact that the abortion rate has gone they are losing. They've done all of this work, they passed all of these laws, and the only thing that they've managed to do is increase suffering, right? They haven't reduced the abortion rate, they've
Kill
increased
women.
maternal mortality, infant mortality, maternal morbidity, like, they've increased suffering and harm, but
For what?
haven't reduced and haven't reduced abortions. I want to shout out Elaine, who is a clinic defender in Kansas. Elaine, thank you for doing that work. Elaine says the thing that has depressed me so much lately is that there are so many protesters and so few of us. That is really hard, and I'm sure what makes that more difficult is the sort of lack of protections, and we see the way that the Trump administration has gone
ASAP.
after clinics, the FACE Act, just making it clear, like, just giving the green light to anti-abortion extremists
Yeah, and
to
I will
attack
say,
people and
Elaine, I started my career at Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast in Houston. The National Right to Life folks used to do their 40 days trainings outside of our clinics. We'd have to walk through throngs of protesters. Our doctors had to wear bulletproof vests to come to work. They would harass us at our homes. They would track by taking pictures of our license plates. Um, it's horrible, and they're only more emboldened. Most recently, um, at the Supreme Court, we've seen an uptick in extremist activism. And yeah, I don't want to say more than that, except that we're tracking the rise of extremist violence. So
Mhm.
please be safe. Number
Yeah.
one, we're taking steps to make sure we are more secure and safe, and we're not asking any of our staff or activists to do anything that would compromise their safety. But we're also trying to think about how else we fight back because it is demoralizing to go to work every day, see protesters and not see
Mhm.
supporters, but it's not an indication of where the majority of folks in your community are.
Yeah.
You're always going to find those extremists, cult followers who are going to be outside hell or high water because they're crazy, like
And they have
literally
nothing better to
mentally
do.
ill, and they have nothing better to do.
They have nothing better to
But
do.
you're protecting life-saving care. So
Right.
it's still demoralizing.
Yeah. Elaine, please feel free to also, like, email me if we can shout out the clinic. If you have, open positions for more volunteers, we can
Yeah.
blast it out to our readers. If you want to get some people to show up in front of there, we can try to, this is part of the reason that, Reproductive Freedom for All exists, why Abortion Every Day exists, is so that people can find, some community and hopefully
Yeah, and
help
share it with
you
us
feel
as well,
supported.
and we'll reach out to our Kansas folks, and, although my guess is they already know Elaine.
Yeah, but everyone,
But
it's
you
a
never
small,
know.
great
You never
world. You never
know.
know. Allison says, yay for the Ulster County clerk in New York that rejected the summons for Maggie Carpenter, who's
Carpenter.
the New York abortion provider, who both Texas and Louisiana is going after. And yes, I'm in Ulster County right now. And it took all of my strength not to go down to the county clerk's office
With a cake.
and be like, here, thank you. Oh, Elaine has been doing this since the 80s. No surprise there. I love to hear it. That's amazing.
Elaine the
We are going
Mule
to let you
Feminist
go
is her
soon.
handle.
Yeah. There you go. I want to be respectful of your time, and we're going to let you go, but I just wanted to ask you one last question. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how people can get involved with Reproductive Freedom for All if they want to find out more about the work that you're doing, help out, what's the best way for them to do that. And of course, we'll put all of the information about the organization in the post of the video when it goes out, so you all will have it in your emails as well.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and being a supporter. You can text REPRO, REPRO, to 59791. I have to look at my cheat sheet. REPRO to 59791, and you will be contacted by our digital team. If you don't want to keep getting texted, you can opt out of that, but it's the fastest way. You could always go to our website and sign up if you're old school and you want to go to reproductivefreedomforall.org and sign up on our website. But the fastest way is text REPRO to 59791. We will get you engaged right away in an action either in your community or nationwide. We generated hundreds of thousands of texts and calls to lawmakers around the big bullshit bill. Well, we're going to be doing accountability work throughout the country, and we're going to be mobilizing calls and emails and texts into Virginia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania this fall. So there's a lot of activity right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's great. So grateful that you made the time to talk with
I'm
us.
so
Thank you
grateful
to
to be with
everyone.
you.
Anytime. You have to come back. This was totally
We'll
fun.
come back and talk about menopause, updated actions on the antis. We should do a whole thing just on that.
I'm
Let's do
down. I'm always down. That sounds great.
That's
And
kind of how I get joy, right? Like you got to punch some people, right?
take it where you can. Take it where you can. I feel very proud of myself that it's 6:30 exactly. I'm getting you out of here right
Woo.
on time. That's incredible. Thank you to everyone for joining. I will send you all an email soon. And I'll see you all online. Good night.